After an incredibly successful trilogy, the journey of Po the Panda on his path of martial arts training has nearly reached completion. Receiving the Staff of Wisdom from Master Oogway, as a symbol of the highest level, the once ordinary panda has proven that, both in ability and character, he truly deserves the title of Dragon Warrior. Therefore, aside from doubts about the quality, my personal curiosity lies in this question. What made DreamWorks take the risk of making another sequel about a character who seemingly has few aspects left to explore? Did they really come up with a story compelling enough to steer the Kung Fu Panda franchise in a completely new direction, much like what Toy Story 4 managed to achieve? Or will this be a low note on the arduous yet incredibly fun journey of self-cultivation? Today, let's join Feifim once again, Sadaba, as we return to the peaceful valley to see if there are any challenges left that can truly test Po now that he has become such a powerful Kung Fu master. Picking up after the events of the third installment, Po is now roaming the world, taking action to eliminate evil and uphold justice. Both of his fathers have also come together to open a noodle shop, and their lives are going extremely well. Until one day, Yirichi Master Shifu suddenly announces that, it is time for Po to fulfill a noble duty, to choose the next Dragon Warrior. From this point on, the gluttonous panda must shoulder a great responsibility, and once again gain new insights and lessons on his journey. Retaining the signature traits of the Kung Fu Panda franchise, the fourth installment treats audiences to bursts of laughter as Po, despite being one of the top martial arts masters in the world, still has a very childlike personality. With the same easily accessible humor, friendly to all ages, combined with the unmistakable voice of comedian Jack Black, Po in the fourth installment is still the Po that audiences have always loved. He's still gluttonous, still unable to calm himself, and still climbs stairs as if his life depends on it. Even the more heartfelt lines are interwoven with playful moments, so the audience never feels like the characters are dryly preaching morals. This has always been a hallmark of Kung Fu Panda, and simply maintaining that familiar atmosphere is enough to keep longtime fans engaged. The martial arts scenes also stay true to the use whatever you have style, and even though Po now possesses the incredibly powerful Staff of Wisdom, he rarely uses this artifact, so the action sequences remain mostly pure martial arts. This also makes it easier for the film to generate laughs, especially in the scene set at a mountaintop restaurant. Speaking of martial arts, the absence of the Furious 5 is entirely understandable, as with a budget just over half of the third installment, the production team simply couldn't afford to pay all the big-name stars. As for animation, DreamWorks is a studio already renowned for its 3D artistry, and ever since the trailer was released, audiences have had no reason to doubt the film's visuals. Even though some slight differences can be noticed, the character designs are all very lively, especially the villain, the Chameleon, whose unpredictable transformations are quite visually appealing. The ancient Chinese architecture and the castles that Po passes by are all depicted meticulously and in great detail. It can be said that if you're just looking for some relaxing moments, it's hard to ask for more from Kung Fu Panda. I heard a lot of laughter from both kids and adults in the theatre, so perhaps this is quite a decent treat for the soul. Although the script is relatively weak compared to the previous installments, in fact, Kung Fu Panda 4 has a rather interesting idea, enough to steer the film in a completely different direction. When Po has reached an almost supreme level of martial arts, his challenge is no longer evil itself, but rather is choosing the right person to carry on that legacy. This puts Po in the same position as Master Oogway once was, and the film cleverly uses this storyline to remind the audience of the very first installment. The stage for selecting the next Dragon Warrior, along with details about the peach tree, the peach seed, and the nurturing process, are all crafted very closely to the first film, instantly reminding viewers of how long the journey alongside Po has been. From once being someone unworthy, the clumsy panda has now become a teacher. The peach seed that Master Shifu planted beneath the great tree has now sprouted fresh green shoots. DreamWorks leans heavily into nostalgia, then bringing back characters like Kai, Lord Shen, and especially Tai Lung to the screen, with the ambition of drawing audiences to theaters. However, I'll talk about Tai Lung and the other villains later. As promising as it sounds, unfortunately, Kung Fu Panda has also wasted a considerable amount of the story's potential. Almost all of the screen time is devoted to developing Po and his new apprentice, but their relationship still isn't convincing enough. Zhen is introduced in a rather negative scene, letting us know that, like Po in the past, she is an unworthy chosen one. Po will redeem her, both proving that anyone can change for the better, and showing that Po himself has reached a new threshold on his journey of self-cultivation. Shifu once saw potential in Po, and now Po will see potential in someone else, officially becoming a teacher himself. That's a decent introduction, right? But Jen herself is a character who lacks development. Her martial arts skills are already excellent, so she doesn't really need Po to teach her much. On top of that, after just one meeting scene and one scene in the prison camp, the two characters suddenly become close and set off together to fight a distant villain. Fortunately, the plot twist at the end of the film answers these questions, somewhat making up for the sense of letdown while watching. To be fair, Jen's background could have made for a great story, but for some reason, every development related to the Fox character feels very rushed. Her feelings for Po, her decision to follow him, her concern for him, and then delivering a passionate speech, all of these happen as quickly as a roller coaster ride. In particular, she is even able to master a powerful technique of pose, one that he had to spend several movies to achieve, and she masters it at a pace that's bafflingly fast. Granted, the director didn't want to turn Jen into a second Po, but if only that the movie were about 20 minutes longer, there could have been more scenes where Po teaches Jen the martial arts techniques she doesn't know yet, as well as convincing the audience more about what makes her worthy of the title she's about to receive. Nevertheless, the interaction between the master and apprentice is quite smooth, saving the audience from a rushed pace. Po has also undergone some changes, such as realizing that fighting isn't always the top priority. And even though these changes aren't particularly pronounced, the film at least manages to create some differences for a character who has become so familiar. Speaking of differences, and it's unfortunate that the two characters with the least convincing journeys are Po's two fathers. It's also quite understandable, as like the main character, they no longer have much room left for development. Mr. Ping is still the ever-worried goose, and the Panda Dad is still just the Panda Dad. It's rather puzzling that these two characters are given their own storyline, especially when the film is willing to completely leave out the Furious Five, who are much more famous and beloved characters. Their decision to pack up and set out to find Po also stems from a rather amusing worry. Did they really need to be that anxious when they've already seen their son defeat countless masters before? But in any case, these two characters are very lovable and funny, and indeed the humor has saved the script a lot in this installment. DreamWorks is a studio famous for its great villains. Not long ago, just 2 years back, their film Puss in Boots introduced the Wolf Death, a grim reaper who terrified audiences. What makes these villains remarkable is not just their memorable backstories, but also the significant contribution they make to the main character's development journey. For example, Death serves as a wake-up call for Puss in Boots when he becomes too arrogant and relies too much on having multiple lives. In the trailer, the chameleon sorceress has the ability to absorb the martial arts of other grandmasters, with scenes where she transforms into them, and especially when she impersonates Po, implying that the greatest enemy of the dragon warrior is actually himself, which is quite intriguing. The fact that the villain could be anyone, anywhere, is also rather frightening. I was looking forward to seeing how Po and Jen would manage against an enemy who could be right beside them without them even knowing. But once again, the film ends up wasting an incredibly promising character. The chameleon is powerful, extremely powerful, but in the end, she is defeated in an incredibly swift manner. Her infiltration scenes, which should have been her greatest weapon, were only used once or twice. And of course, when it comes to a one-on-one fight with Po, this sorcerer never stood a chance of winning. This made me feel like the scene where Tai Lung is summoned actually diminishes his character. He only appeared as a spirit, to say a few things that Po probably didn't even need to hear, seeking recognition that Po didn't really care about. And allow me to spoil a bit, with his top-tier martial arts skills, are we really supposed to believe he couldn't dodge the tongue of someone like Chameleon, who doesn't even know Kung Fu? Speaking of what makes the villains great, let's take a look back at the enemies in Kung Fu Panda. Tai Lung, a prodigy from a young age, and Po, an unworthy chosen one, give us a contrasting picture of a martial artist's character and the heavy consequences of misguided upbringing. Moving on to the second film, although Lord Chen's martial arts skills aren't as strong, the cannons he invented are even more impressive, as they symbolize a rejection of the past. He rejects Kung Fu, rejects family, but at the same time, there is Po, who seeks the roots of martial arts, and the inner peace within his soul. There is always a contrast between the characters like the nature of yin and yang, the black and white colors on Po's body. Chameleon was unable to achieve that. She possesses Jen's ambition, but lacks a clear motivation. And even the origin of her shape-shifting magic is never revealed. This is merely a mishmash of all the previous villains, resulting in a character whose purpose is as muddled as the mixed forms she transforms into. For that reason, in the final moment between Po and the Kung Fu Masters, the only thing that evokes any emotion is the Oogway Essence soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, and sadly, that too is a song from the first film. All in all, Kung Fu Panda is not a bad movie, but it would be more accurate to call it a wasted opportunity. With such a promising concept, Po could have been an excellent teacher, introduced an equally interesting successor, and from there, the tributes to the first film, like the image of the peach tree, the young sprout, or the selection of the dragon warrior, would have been far more emotional. I imagine that if Po and Tai Lung were to meet again under different circumstances, that scene could have been truly epic. You might think I'm being too critical of a light-hearted, fun film, but Kung Fu Panda has never been just a simple piece of entertainment. Even so, if you only care about the ending and not the journey leading up to it, the final scene is still quite good, as it connects back to where the story began, forming a complete circle. Po shares a moment with Jen that is unmistakably reminiscent of the conversation he had with Master Shifu after defeating Tai Lung. At this point, perhaps Po has finally reached the highest level of martial arts, not only mastering the skills, but also learning how to let go. After leaving the theatre, I realized that the sense of disappointment was simply because I love this franchise so much. And although it didn't quite meet expectations, Kung Fu Panda 4 is still a decent film. Could it be that Jen's journey is still ahead of her? Perhaps her peach seed has not yet reached the time to sprout? Only time will tell. But for now, just go to the theatre to support this work. At least it will bring you some relaxing moments. About Mr. Ball.